Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, Episode 109, Global Change. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today I will look at global change. Well, there's many ways things are changing on a worldwide basis. It is important to pay attention to them and be aware of possible solutions. Sure. So, one of the most common problems, or not the most common, perhaps the most prevailing that I could think of right off the bat, is global warming. Global warming is real. Just watch CNN. Recent features included Greenland going green. That is, the ice is melting and more land is open for agriculture on Greenland. Also, some South Pacific islands are literally sinking as ocean levels rise. Parts of Bangladesh are sinking as well, and probably many other areas are probably sinking. So, this is from global warming, and it's changing things. It's going to change the population dynamics, that is, where animals live. As the temperature grows warmer, animals will find areas to live that are farther north, well, in the northern hemisphere that is, to avoid excessive heat. Ocean conditions are changing. In the ocean, though, it is critical that a balance is maintained as far as proper oxygen levels in the water and, more importantly, the correct temperature of the water. With the phenomenon of global warming, this has put more fresh water into the ocean in northern latitudes, and this change in salinity is affecting how the Gulf Stream operates, because fresh water is less dense than salt water. And so the fresh water gets on top, and the Gulf Stream, which is salt water coming up from the south, will dive under it. And this could cause climate change in Britain and other areas around there, with it getting cooler. A strange effect from global warming, admittedly. However, it might be a temporary local phenomenon. Then again, it could spur into something more serious. It is hard to say. But even if global warming somehow leads to global cooling because of interactions with the oceans or for other reasons, well, it's still not necessarily a good thing, for the cooling could be too much. Global cooling may also be caused by excessive dust in the atmosphere, either from volcanoes or from pollution. Well, anyway, overall, the effect of pollution is towards global warming, though, and thus we see its effects. Global warming is real. Greenland is melting. So, how do we solve this? Well, the global warming and excessive pollution is caused by excessive fossil fuel use and excessive burning of coal. So we have to alter this energy regime with new technology that uses less energy. This is critical. My intuition suggests this new technology is already available, and it just has to be bought out. The powers at be repress it. Oh well, things must change. Sure, and with awareness comes change. Of course, I'll get to that more later. Let's focus on all the negative stuff first, then the solutions later. So we got the problem of excessive pollution, global warming. Also, of course, we have economic stress. Well, from the mortgage meltdown here in our country, which was caused by deregulation of the mortgage industry and mortgage lenders, mortgage brokers taking advantage of that deregulation and burying rate increases in the fine print and selling mortgages to people who might not truly qualify. All of these factors led to a mess of excess real estate for sale, which has caused the price to fall of the average home in the U.S. Unfortunately, this is a real mess and is affecting much of the economy. Well, as I said, this was caused in part by deregulation, and of course other industries have been deregulated too, often with adverse reactions. For instance, with the airline industry, maintenance schedules might not be as strict now as they once were when regulation was in place. Routing was better back then. Well, anyway. So let's get back to some other problems. Well, of course, we have overpopulation, and there's bound to be some solutions to it, besides the traditional ones of war and disease. We have to look to new technology and cooperation amongst people and nations to help us through the problem of overpopulation. Then we have food shortages. Well, food shortages in large part can be alleviated by better distribution methods. By getting the food to where it's needed, that will solve most of the problem, of course. Occasionally, dictators might not allow the food to get to the people who truly need it, and often this is the case. However, nations must work together, people must work together to solve this. And, well, perhaps through higher food costs, we could pass some of the higher food costs to solve the distribution problem of getting the food to the world's poor. So one possible solution would be for the rich to pay more for their food in order to make sure that the food is distributed to poor nations. Of course, relief organizations that thrive on donations are another option, of course, which this option is already in place, but more support is obviously needed. Of course, fresh water could be an issue too. We need more wells dug in areas where water is needed, and this should be subsidized. But what else is going on? Another problem that causes economic stress is lack of resources. Well, from water to fuel to food to almost everything you could think of. resources are becoming more scarce, and this is driving up prices. So conservation is needed, and alternatives, perhaps alternatives to resources that are in demand, perhaps by using resources that are less in demand instead of them, might be a possible solution that could be implemented in certain areas. Anyway, also possible problems facing us on a global level, well, here, perhaps more on a national level in the United States, is problems with medicine and healthcare. I've seen this myself with my mom, as she was prescribed the exact opposite medicine she needed for over a year before I read the warning in big black letters that pointed to the obvious problem with the drug and that she needed the exact opposite drug. Why didn't the doctor see something so obvious that I could see it? Well, that's a good question. Unfortunately, I believe this problem may be widespread, perhaps caused by undue influence by the pharmaceutical industry. So beware and do your own research, get second opinions, and monitor yourself and other people who need health care. So now let's focus on solutions to some of these problems caused by pollution, overpopulation, excessive resource use, and other things. Well, first of all, we should encourage conservation. Well, in many areas, soil conservation for the land and land use, proper land use, making sure enough is set aside for parkland and agriculture. But it goes beyond that, because with agriculture we have to make sure we have proper seed diversity. This is critical and is probably a widespread problem in modern times. I may do a show on this in the near future. It's called monoculture. That is, one type of seed is used for nearly all the needs of the crop. In other words, one type of corn is planted for almost all of the U.S., let's say, when several hundred years ago, perhaps several hundred varieties of corn existed, where in modern times, as far as widespread agriculture use, it might just be a few varieties that are in use. And the less varieties that are in use, the worse the problems could be. Even if everything's fine now, eventually problems could crop up, such as disease, insects, or drought that could play havoc with this wonderful seed. That's why diversity is needed. That's why many types of seed are needed. Each variety has its own specialty: resistance to drought, resistance to floods, resistance to certain types of pests, and so on. So seed banks need to be encouraged, and planting a wide variety of crops need to be encouraged. And we need to move away from this monoculture mess. Water conservation is critical, as the world's supply of fresh water is becoming more limited. And, of course, power conservation is critical too. our energy resources use up natural resources and cause pollution, leading to global warming. We must conserve our power. That is critical. Well, at least power use creates global warming in the sense of coal-fired plants. I guess with nuclear plants, it wouldn't create global warming. Well, I guess unless it was a little bit of a disaster of sorts, and then we could have nuclear global warming. But anyway, and I guess hydroelectric plants would be good too. But of course we have to dam our rivers and streams to create these, and these might create problems. Perhaps a series of small hydroelectric plants might be a solution to certain regional power needs. We need to move away from dirty technology like coal and towards cleaner technology like hydroelectric and nuclear. And of course, don't forget about the 3 R's. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. This applies to everything you do to truly make an impact and affect the world in a better way by slowing down the effects of excessive resource use, which could lead to global warming. It is advisable to reduce what you use and reuse where possible, and then recycle. So remember, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Anyway, there are some other issues too that should be dealt with. Another problem, well, is with religious intolerance and churches gaining too much power, religions gaining too much power. Why should organized religion be a broker between us and God when we can connect to God directly through our own awareness and through our own meditation and through our own independent research and learning? This should be encouraged. If we let the church tell us what to do, well, as I said, we're setting ourselves up by having a broker between us and God, setting us up for what? Well, we're setting ourselves up for failure in this sense that there could be contamination here by not having a direct connection to God. Often organized religion goes awry. And this could be seen, well, through many religious conflicts, from ancient times to modern. Of course, another thing to encourage is separation of church and state. This is critical. For we don't need to have the church have undue influence over the state. Remember, religion is a subtle thing, and each Bible passage can be interpreted several ways, or at least often this is the case. So, if we have an undue influence over the government by the church, well, this could create bad policy decisions and unexpected ones, as I said, from misinterpretation of the Bible. And, well, I say religious freedom is much better with many interpretations of the Bible and other religions being encouraged. Sure, we need the diversity and we need the tolerance and we need laws set up that recognize it and laws that are not narrowly focused on religious goals or strongly based on religious objectives, at least not the religious objectives of any one religion. We have to take all religions into account when forming new laws, and we must encourage separation of church and state. But perhaps even more important is education and research. These are essential for job opportunities and decision making. I cannot overemphasize this. This is critical. Everybody needs to be involved, from old people who think they are done with their education, to middle-aged people like me, to young people who are still in the education process. Education needs to be, well, comprehensive. Sure, unfortunately it might not be. And unfortunately, certain areas might not be covered well enough in most schools. If you feel this is the case, well, take steps, well, to self-educate. If you're not getting enough education out of your school, it's not comprehensive enough, or the right subjects aren't being taught, do your own research on the internet and through the library. Talk to other people about it. It is important to be aware and to be educated. This is critical. Sure. But what else is critical? Cooperation. Sure. Whether it be amongst your family or your neighbors, or even on larger levels, such as cooperation amongst nations. Cooperation needs to be encouraged. For what happens if there's lack of cooperation, often this will breed mistrust. And when there's mistrust, sometimes information will be withheld. And when information is withheld, well, then the wrong decision is made. So by having cooperation and having an open mind and being educated and having diverse knowledge, this will lead to better decision making. There's always more factors out there than you know. And often reality is often different than what is reported on the news. For the news might distort the story or not even report it at all. So just be aware of that. Sure, because the problem is absolute power corrupts absolutely. So power must be limited. Well, government power must be limited, especially by the executive branch. Congress must reel in excessive power that President Bush gave to himself. And also we need to have our civil rights back. Many of our rights have been stripped away during the last 8 years under the Bush administration, unfortunately. So we must remember this absolute power corrupts absolutely. And thus things need to be monitored and things need to be open. Everything from the national government to the state government to the local government. Encourage open meeting laws. That is, all meetings that affect policy decisions, all meetings amongst public officials must be open, available to the public, recorded, and reported to the public so we can know when bad decisions are made by our lawmakers and we could quickly stop them in their tracks and reverse the decision before too much damage is done. Sure. And we need to think of that. We need to think of being watchdogs and think of monitoring almost everything. Don't be trusting. Don't make assumptions. It is better to know than not to know. For knowledge is the key. Sure. And so to get the knowledge, we have to have cooperation. And we must have diversity. And we must not have any organization or individual having too much power over us. So remember, education is encouraged by having less people having power over us and by cooperation. And by, of course, exploration and research. Sure. Well, seems like we have some extra time on our hands. Oh well, seems like I'm about done with this global change mess. So let's move on to something else. Like the direct connection to God. Sure. I assume it's there. I assume we all have it as individuals. Through our awareness, we can connect to God through meditation. Why? Well, because the self is an illusion and reality is an illusion. In fact, this could be proven. I covered it from several angles in the past on the Casey Waters Show. From quantum physics to Buddhism. There are many theories that state that, quote, reality doesn't exist. Well, a good example from quantum physics is a particle cannot be determined, that is, its position and its velocity and direction of movement, all of that cannot be determined unless it is observed. This is true of all subatomic particles. Their location is not known until it is recorded and observed. Otherwise, who knows? And this even affects into the past. That is, there has been experiments done where data recorded in the past that was observed in a time in the future of that past, well, the future observations and the intentions of the observers actually affected the data. In other words, let's say there was a bunch of random coin toss, thousands of them, and these were tossed and recorded. But then let's say several weeks later, some observers went over the data. Well, if one observer was hoping for more heads, when he looks over the data, chances are he'll find just that. If one observer is looking for more tails, they'll probably find that. The statistical variation is minimal, perhaps a 0.5 percentage point or less. But even that is significant. And even that shows that the observer has some effect over reality. And since reality cannot be fixed on the quantum level until it is observed, perhaps then reality is not real because it has to be observed in order to be fixed. Otherwise, it is in flux, and otherwise it is unknown. And Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2
at CaseyWaters.com.